you have to sell me the house. Background. Years ago, when I was in college, my parents decided to sell their house and move into something smaller. Now, this was their dream home. 5 bedrooms, huge, on a small lake, and just all around, a pretty sweet house on a nice lot. Now, my dad is a sales and marketing guy, so the story of how we got this house is that he simply knocked on the door one day. He was friendly with them and told them that if they ever wanted to sell, that we would be interested. Years later, they did just that, and it was between us and another family. Blind bid, and ours was higher. Back to the present. When my parents decided to sell, kids moved out, too much house for the 2 of them, they ended up just directly selling to our immediate neighbor. She apparently had money, was very friendly, and we knew her pretty well. I guess she'd always liked her house or something. Somehow, word got out, and some entitled suburban people in the neighborhood were not fans of that. Shortly before the sale, I was at home for the weekend doing laundry and watching The House and Pets while my parents were away for the weekend. In the middle of the afternoon, I hear a knock on the door. I answer it to a stern-looking Karen type, and the conversation goes as follows. "Is this house for sale?" No. "Well, where are your parents?" With a stern voice, I say, "Out. And I don't know her, and I don't want to give too much to her." "Well, I heard your parents are selling this house, but you just told me it's not for sale." "Yeah." "So it is for sale then." She's smirking like she just won something. No, it's not." "Well, who are your parents selling this house to?" "Oh, it's a private sale," in a nice, calm voice. "Well, I didn't get a chance to buy it." "Sounds like it." "Well, that's not fair. They have to offer it to anyone in the neighborhood." No, they don't. That's a lie." "But I want this house. I deserve this house. My family—" "No, you really don't." With a chuckle, I cut her off. "They have to sell it to me." "No, they don't." "What is their phone number? I'm going to talk to them because you don't know anything." "Yeah, you're not getting that from me." She could have easily gotten it and possibly a cell phone number for my parents from the neighborhood directory. "How dare you?" Just like this, no. "Well, give them this and tell them they have to call me to sell the house." She handed me a business card. "You realize you have no say in who they sell their house to, right? And that your attitude is petulant and entitled?" I then visually tossed the card over my shoulder and shut the door. She kept yelling something and I didn't care. I did tell my parents about it and gave them the business card. My mom knew her some and didn't like her for the same reasons. I later heard she came back and was trying to get me in trouble, but they turned her away, and apparently my mom chuckled when the lady was going off on how rude and disrespectful she was. She insisted to them that the HOA rules said that they had to offer it to the neighborhood. Untrue. And over a decade later, the neighbor they sold it to still lives there. I just love how she knew that she could get to buy the house. I had a blast with the interaction and got to shut down an entitled person. I worked retail at the time, so it was even more satisfying. Annoying, inconsiderate neighbors need advice. Posted by Carly98. OP gives us updates and more info in the comments. Me, a 25 female, and my husband, 28 male, moved into our neighborhood about a year and some months ago. The neighbors at first seemed fine. As time went on, even after a few days, we got the impression that they didn't know what personal boundaries were or respect in accounts to their kids coming and just playing in our yard constantly while they have plenty of land for them to be on. The first few days we were moving in, their son, who's probably 7 or 8 years old, he walked into our house uninvited and told my husband, "My daddy said I could come in whenever I want." Which is weird and rude on one hand, and also to let your child come into a stranger's house unsupervised when it was the first few days of us being there? We don't know y'all like that, and you don't know us like that. I was also 9 months pregnant at the time with our firstborn daughter, who's 1, and made me uneasy and aggravated. When we first moved in, they also had a mixed range of livestock that they kept in their backyard, talking like chickens, ducks, potbelly pigs, and also 3 dogs at the time. When they would free roam, they'd come out into our yard constantly, The pigs would rut up the yard, the dogs would mess with our dog, who is and was very protective on the account that I was pregnant and had my daughter outside with us when we would do our yard work, or just hang out outside, so they would just get in fights and get rough, which made my daughter get scared and upset. A lot of their livestock ended up dying or getting killed because they don't know what they're doing when it comes to proper care for farm animals. Their daughter killed one of their ducklings by being too rough. Then now they just have a few chickens. Their male dogs are also not fixed, so leading to our female healer to get pregnant not once, but twice. I have addressed this concern to the wife, 25 female, about her dogs free roaming as we are right on the road where cars come down all the time, and also for them to not come in our yard unless they're fixed at least. But she doesn't care, she's a bee. Our dog is now fixed and stays in our yard mostly on her leash, but they don't care and they still let their male dogs free roam and come into our yard even if ours is on her leash outside and they come and bother her while she has her bathroom time or playtime. I have a handful more of things that I can name wrong with these people, but I'll just cut it short for now. I just want to hear others' opinions on this on account of there's no animal control where I live, so nothing much I can do about their dog still coming over here while I try to take our dog out and to be outside with my daughter while she plays. And talking to them does nothing as they don't get it, nor do they care. Update from OP says, I have no problem with their animals free roaming on their property. That's what the wife wasn't comprehending when I told her. But once they cross that property line onto ours, she has no right to get upset if something happens to them. They have claimed our dog has killed some of their chickens and they have it on video. But I was sent no such video. And trust me, she's not shy about pulling up receipts, even though their dogs roam freely as well. So, no right to accuse our dog of doing any of that when they easily could have killed them. That's what we've been in the process of doing when we started our fence a few months back, and it's been a slow work in progress. We started with about 20 panels of 10-foot high wood fencing. When that runs out, we're going to lead the rest with livestock wire all around our land because we would like to have livestock of our own also. As well, when it's all finished up, maybe some chickens and rabbits, quail, and maybe a goat. And for our dog to have a space for sure. I sure hope there's something you can do to escalate this, OP. These neighbors are crazy. Have you ever had a bad neighbor? OP gives Karen a taste of her own medicine. This story's called Old Woman Yells at Me for Not Telling Her to Get Out of the Way, posted by Livy5000. Okay, so I was in Walmart for groceries. I'm not in any hurry, and I don't mind waiting behind someone. There was this old woman in front of me on a certain aisle. I was patiently waiting for her to move so I could get what I needed. She noticed me and asked all cranky like, "Do you need something from here?" Yes. She didn't give a chance to say more, which would have been, but I don't mind waiting. She gets really angry and screams at me, "Well, why didn't you tell me to move out of the way? I would have moved." Now I got really angry and I snapped at her. Unlike you, I'm not a rude cow. I have no problem waiting since I have plenty of time, and even if I didn't, I still wouldn't be so rude. I was raised right. I deliberately added the last part since a lot of old people like to use that so much. She got really angry and turned red in the face and started screaming at me. I rolled my eyes and said, "Whatever." More anger, and then I thought to myself, and I'm out of here. I'm not dealing with this crap. So I turned around to go the other way, and she starts following me, still screaming. So I ran and started giggling. She wasn't able to run. The screaming died down. I hid for a few minutes and then went back to get what I wanted. It was when I got outside to put my groceries in my car. I had just finished and just got into my car, and then she appeared at my window screaming. Just about scared me half to death. I couldn't help myself. I mean, when would I really get such an awesome opportunity to be a butthole? Since she couldn't actually harm me, I became childish. I rolled down my window just a few centimeters and it stuck out my thumb and said, "Nanaboo, you can't catch me." The stunned astonishment and silence was very entertaining. Then her face got redder and kind of purple. The screaming started again, which was muted when I closed the window. I did a few more childish things which increased the screaming, and then suddenly she stopped. I was gleefully laughing. She ran out of breath and walked away rather abruptly. I was kind of disappointed, but oh well. It was when I got home and got my kids to help bring in the groceries that both of them took one look at me and said, "What did you do?" Haha. You know what they say about assuming, Karen, and if you can't take it, don't dish it out. The time I ruined my high school teacher's career and got her fired in the greatest way possible. Posted by Johnny Provolone. Backstory. I was a senior in high school at the time, and I had never been the brightest student. I was a solid C student, and I'd never received a detention or had any kind of bad student record. This is important because to this day, I still have no idea why the teacher treated me this way. The teacher, who we will name Mrs. Frank, had been a teacher there for more than a decade and was widely known for being a petty, heartless witch who the administrators saw as the golden child. Mrs. Frank taught algebra, which is my worst subject, so naturally, I had issues understanding the lessons and would ask questions frequently. To some, these questions are easily answered, but to me, it was rocket science. Usually, when someone asks a dumb question, no one should address it. However, in Miss Frank's case, she would belittle me in front of everyone by saying things such as, "And here comes the slow boy again. Wow, surprise, surprise. You don't understand it again? Really? We have to go extra slow for you today, don't we?" And so on and so on. I tried going to the administration about it before, but again, she was considered the golden child. They would send someone in to examine her during class, and she would act respectful and normal for one day, and then go back to being a witch on the next. This goes on for about half the year until I had enough. I went to the local Radio Shack, bought a recorder, and secretly recorded every insult she would throw at me. I would sometimes instigate to make up for the lost time. Yeah, go ahead, feed the fire. Fast forward to the end of the year, and I'm sitting in Mrs. Frank's class when I ask a question. Her response, and I quote because it's burned into my brain, was, "I've been teaching here for over 10 years, and that was the single dumbest question I've ever heard come from anyone's mouth." She continued the lesson without answering. I calmly stood up, packed my stuff, and headed to the nurse's office to dismiss myself from school. We were allowed to dismiss ourselves if we were 18. I went home, compiled all of the brutal tapes into one glorious masterpiece, and headed back the next day to show the administrators. I sat down with the principal, and we listened to a couple of the insults before he stopped me. He wanted more witnesses present, as well as Mrs. Frank. He told me we would meet the next day where I could show him and the rest of the administrators the full tape. I walk into school the next morning being the most nervous I've ever been for anything. I was called down to the office where I met with some board directors, the local school police officer, the principal, the vice principal, and Mrs. Franks. What follows was some of the greatest minutes of my life. I watched as the administrators went from fed up with being in another useless meeting to furious and speechless, with some of them keeping their mouths open for the duration of the tape. I also watched Mrs. Frank go from confident and stuck up to her realizing that she had effed up beyond repair. She was publicly roasting herself in front of the most important people from the district. The tape ended, and without hesitation, the administrators looked around in astonishment, and the principal turns to me and says, "I think we have heard everything we need to. Thank you." And I was quietly dismissed from the room. The final time I saw Mrs. Frank was leaving the room. I looked back, and we made eye contact through her tear-filled eyes as I gave the biggest, most evil smile. I returned to class the next week, and Mrs. Frank was nowhere to be found. The story spread quickly throughout the school, and I was seen as a saint. I had successfully gotten her fired and made it almost impossible for Mrs. Frank to return to her teaching career, as well as cut off most of her connections that she had with other teachers in the school. I had ruined her financially because no school district in the area would hire this walking piece of garbage. If you're reading this or listening to this, Mrs. Frank, I'd like to take this moment to tell you to go love yourself. Dirty, dirty little lunch thief, posted by Little Miss Bunny Woman. In the past, I have read about dirty, dirty little office lunch thieves, and I've wanted to share mine but had other things going on to post it. This took place when I was still a teen, fresh out of university, working directly under an engineer. The office I was doing my 4,000 hours in was fairly large, 5 floors of a large office building, a Toronto construction firm. Well, I was lazy, and I always picked up a lunch from Whole Foods, usually sushi, on my way to work. My floor had its own break room and fridge, and for the first 6 months, nothing ever went missing. Until we got a batch of university office interns in, and they were paid at that. Then, wouldn't you know, lunches would go missing, and it wasn't just mine. Any lunch in store packaging was gone if there was a name on it or not. Well, after 2 weeks of our lunches just walking away, we're all getting issued. Don't you mess with my salmon sashimi. One of the engineers comes up with an idea and asks everyone to throw in a couple of dollars to solve this problem. The following week, he sends a text to the store-bought lunch people to meet in the break room before work and sent a text to everyone in the office to not touch any of the packaged lunches. We meet up and he hands us this little spray bottle to spray the packaging. It was this black light reactive spray, which means it glows from a black light, but completely undetectable. Lunch rolls around and guess what? Every single packaged lunch is gone. And this guy brings out a black light and starts looking for fingerprints. He found them on the door down the hall to the elevator. Now imagine 5 of the super nerdiest engineers you have ever seen going down a hallway with a black light, like something from a discount CSI. Well, there's fingerprints everywhere, right up to the elevator, on the buttons, down to the 2nd floor. Down the hallway at this time, I figured some of the interns are nicking our lunches, but I was wrong. We followed it right to the head of the sales department's desk, and, well, we demand to see his hands, and they were glowing like crazy. Not to mention he had touched his face, so there was this glowing mess covering his face. The guy knew he was caught, and we made an agreement not to go to HR, but to get a picture and pizza for our floor every Friday for 2 months. We stayed extra that day to print out the glowing mess that was his face, and we printed out at least 100 of them with the caption, "Dirty, dirty lunch thief." Those dang things went up everywhere. The bathrooms, all the entryways of the building, every office door and desk in sight. Needless to say, the lunches stopped going missing and I was able to eat my sushi in peace. HOA Karen demands what I do on my property, but I'm not even in the HOA. Click the video on your screen so you don't miss the crazy fallout of this one, and I'll see you there.